So much today for our secondary scheduling roundtable. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alice Lai, and I'm a director here at the District Management Group. We appreciate you all taking the time to be with us today, and I'm so excited to dive into our conversation about approaches to strategic secondary scheduling today, featuring our district partner, Mamaroneck Union Free School District in New York. Before we begin, we'd like to provide a quick overview of our district management group mission, who we are, what we do, and why we are here today. We were founded in 2004 with a mission to achieve systemic improvement in public education. We partner with hundreds of districts coast to coast to really help address their most pressing needs in districts large and small and in rural, urban, and suburban areas. Now, we really focus on doing two things, combining management techniques and educational best practices. We define success as what is good for students, what's good for operations, and what is cost effective. And at the intersection of these three things is our mission, creating lasting improvements in public education to enhance student outcomes. Our current offerings here at the District Management Group combine management techniques and education best practices and are organized into four main practice areas: DM learning, DM consulting, DM schedules, and breakthrough results. Now, as I mentioned, my name is Alice. I started off as an elementary school teacher for 10 years, and I was a middle school principal for 5. I built school schedules in every building I worked in because I said yes the first time my principal asked me. It really became something that I truly learned to love. I understand how challenging of a process it can be as well. I've co-led the Secondary Scheduling Institute here at the District Management Group for the past 4 years, and just so excited to have you all here with us today. You're in for a real treat. I'm joined by my colleague, Joe Costello, who is our resident secondary scheduling expert on our consulting team. So Joe, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Alice. Wonderful. Amazing. So great to see all of you on the screen today. As Alice mentioned, my name is Joe Costello. I'm another director at District Management Group. I sort of wear two different hats at DMG. I'm both a director on our consulting team. So that means I'm leading our various custom consulting engagements with school districts and state departments of education all across the United States. I'm also a co-facilitator of our Secondary Scheduling Institute with Alice. So get to do quite a bit of best practice professional learning opportunities for schools and district leaders from teams all across the country, and really dig into all things secondary scheduling. Similar to Alice, I got my background in the classroom. I'm from the greater Boston area originally, but lived and worked out in Las Vegas, Nevada, out in the Clark County School District out there. That's really where I developed my passion for public education, but also my passion for how to make the systems and structures around our schools work a little bit better. Part of the reason I'm so passionate about secondary scheduling is that during my time in the classroom, I think the high school that I worked at, we ended up having, I think, maybe 5 or 6 different schedules, depending on which way you look at it, over the course of just a few years, which came with a whole host of challenges, right? What was so interesting in reflecting on that experience, it's less about the design of the schedule itself and more about how time within the schedule is being used, and how schools make the connection between those systems and structures and how they prepare their students and their staff members to really use that time effectively. So it's really with that lens that I've approached a lot of my work with District Management Group, both in our Secondary Scheduling Institute as well as our various consulting engagements. Wonderful. So we are so excited for our time with you today. Just to give you a little bit of a layout in terms of how we're going to structure our time, I'm just going to start with a quick overview of sort of the quintessential problems to be solved with secondary scheduling, why secondary scheduling can be so challenging. And then we're going to transition things over, introduce Dr. Sampson in a moment, to do a bit of a case study on what this work has looked like in one of our partner districts. So to start, I'm going to just try and frame for us all what this quintessential problem to be solved is related to secondary scheduling. Why is it so challenging? Because in theory, it's a fairly straightforward process, right? It's thinking about what your various course offerings are, what your larger bell schedule needs to look like. But in practice, right, things get a lot messier. And what we have found is that it really starts with making trade-offs. As school and district leaders, you face excessive and oftentimes competing requests for really what should go into your building schedules, right? All these things, different kinds of programs, focus on SEL, more rigorous courses, different instructional requirements depending on the state that you're coming from. Just different classes being too short, wanting more variety in electives or course offerings or levels, things like that. And then, of course, different contractual obligations that you have to navigate. And then somehow all of those requests have to be packed into one schedule, right? And what we find is that in our work with schools and districts, especially as you think about how you navigate some of the trade-offs, some of the inherent natural trade-offs that you have to make, two very large problems emerge. The first is that schedules run the risk of becoming disconnected to your district strategy, right? So you're not spending your time on the things that would actually be improving outcomes for students. When you look at what your full schedule looks like, you don't have the right number of sections or the right opportunities for the things that are really going to move the needle for students in your community. And then the second problem that we observe is that schedules and staffing plans become a little inefficient, both in terms of the use of your staff FTE, but also when you think about time as one of your resources, staff and student time. So in that sense, you're not really maximizing the impact of your precious staff members, which may come with some financial implications depending on the state of resourcing in your district. So it's with that lens that we approach our work at District Management Group. Just to give you just a general sense of how we typically support districts, we'll do custom consulting engagements. We'll do these secondary scheduling opportunity reviews, which are deep dives into the staffing and scheduling data, interviews and engagement with your various stakeholders, and then pulling all of those findings together for a customized set of findings and implementation support. As Alice and I have both alluded to, we also offer the Secondary Scheduling Institute, which is really more of a best practice professional learning experience for different school and district teams. It comes with a variety of best practice content sessions, as well as some custom coaching calls, and then joining this larger network of like-minded peers from districts all across the country. And then we also have our own scheduling software at District Management Group, really targeted for elementary scheduling, but also has this really wonderful program for special education and other related service providers, and how you think about how you can schedule those services a little bit more effectively. So again, just to give you a little bit of framing around who we are, how we support districts, and what this larger problem to solve is related to scheduling. And with that, I want to switch over to really the core of our conversation today. I'm so excited to be able to introduce Dr. Chuck Sampson, who's the Superintendent of Schools in Mamaroneck Union Free School District down in Mamaroneck, New York, down in Mamaroneck for us up here in Boston. With that, Dr. Sampson, can I have you just give a quick intro of yourself, and then we can do a quick overview of where Mamaroneck is, what Mamaroneck is really all about, and then we can go from there.
Sure thing. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Alice. Thanks, folks, for coming out. I am the proud superintendent of the Mamaroneck Union Free School District. I'm up on celebrating my first anniversary here. My 16th as a superintendent of schools. I was a longtime superintendent in New Jersey who chose to cross the river. But my background prior to that was a high school principal and assistant principal who was a scheduler. And so sort of having the understanding of the power of the master schedule and how it drives every sort of human resource that is deployed across a building was something that was very important to me throughout my career. And just one thing that I've sort of seen when you come across buildings is that there's usually one individual who knows how to do the schedule. It's locked in with that one individual. There's some really different ways across districts, especially with elementary schools, to schedule. And so a focus across some of the work I've done over my career is really trying to bring some consistency and stability and understanding and capacity to the scheduling process as a whole.
Yeah, fantastic. And so just for folks listening in at home, Mamaroneck, we're talking Mamaroneck, New York, suburb outside of New York City. hear some details about the district. Chuck, what else is Mamaroneck known for? What really makes the community what it is? Just to give folks a sense of what you're all about as an.
Yeah, it's a district that prides itself on innovation. We have a original civic research program that's a 4-year program that connects students to a lot of social justice issues and the such. We have an original science research program where students are performing original research from a 9 to 12 scope as well. We have a very successful dual language program that runs K through 10th grade, known as Dos Caminos. And we have a really vibrant internship program for all seniors. So every senior goes through a multi-week internship here at the end of their senior year that the district is really proud of. We're a proud member of the League of Innovative Schools and learn from and with that group as well. It's a really interesting community. We are, on paper, a high wealth community, but that high wealth masks 25% of our students who speak another language at home or are economically disadvantaged in some way or another. So that's a huge chunk of our population as well. Yeah. They all feed into, we have 4 elementary schools that feed into a very large middle school, about 1,400. And our high school now is up to about 1,800. So we've seen some real surge in our population, particularly of our multilingual learners in the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Chuck. I think what was so striking in terms of our partnership with you all and the opportunity that we had to talk to a lot of your different stakeholders is just how many different kinds of programs and services for students you offer, which is really a tremendous thing. But of course, as you know better than anybody, comes with some challenges for how you make some decisions about how to schedule, how to prioritize, because inevitably you have to make some trade-offs for how things really come and fit together within the schedule in a really thoughtful way.
Yeah, and especially at that 6 to 12 level where you're looking at elective offerings and you're really trying to provide, in this day and age, some real connected pathways for students. How that all fits in the schedule and maximizing the staff and the space that you have is certainly a focus of the work. And part of our scheduling work was also taking a deep dive at our room utilization and how we could more effectively sort of harness the physical infrastructure of our place as well. All of that, right, to develop programs that meet student needs where they are in a way that doesn't break the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I think that's a great transition. So how we partnered with you all and really the core of the work that you all were engaged in was thinking about this secondary scheduling opportunity review. So you have your Hommocks Middle School and Mamaroneck High School, shared a little bit about some of the program offerings, total number of students served, just the diversity and mix of needs within these 2 buildings. Be curious though to get your reflections. What was sort of the problem to solve? As you were walking in as a new superintendent, what prompted you to engage in this, even just asking some of these questions about how to design more strategic secondary schedules?
So I think the first sort of prompt there is what we all live in. Everybody on this call lives in the world that schools live in the anecdotal, right? Somebody says, oh, we do that because, or we can't do that. And it's never sort of verified as to the why. And so when we started looking at some strategic planning here and long-term frameworks for some of the work that we wanted to do, the schedule and the capacity to build the schedule were something that we identified as like real critical junctures, right? So the schedule itself, we felt, we wondered if it was inhibiting some of the decisions we were making in some way. And the capacity across the district for individuals who had some real extensive scheduling experience was really sparse here. There were 2, basically across that middle and high school, there were 2 people that had ever really touched the schedule in each of those buildings in any in-depth manner. And so first and foremost, as a new superintendent, I wanted to build capacity of the individuals in the district to own that schedule and to share that knowledge and to come to some shared decision-making around what that looks like.
Yeah,
Secondly, I wanted to identify where we thought there were gaps in the schedule and sort of separate fact from fiction.
absolutely.
And wanted to make sure that we were putting on paper the best schedule possible to serve as many divergent needs. And that was an extensive process. So, and Joe, I'm sure we'll go through it, but it was a multi-month deep dive across both. And at the middle school, what was also driving us, the high school was course offerings, course availability, maximizing our staffing. When we're onboarding new programs, where do we have the space and where were we falling short? We wanted to make sure that every student always had 2 electives, which was a difficult proposition over the previous years in terms of some staffing restrictions. And at the middle school, we really wanted to build out a flexible teaming model. And we wanted to build some sort of flex time into that schedule to really build out the team concept at the middle school, which had really gone ignored for years. And there had also been, here for just everybody's sake, right? Like a high school principal who was in her 2nd year on the job, an interim middle school principal who was coming off of 3 principals in 5 years at the middle school. And so there wasn't a sort of shared historical knowledge about, how these schedules were developed. And so we wanted to take everything back to ground zero, build the capacity. So we built down about 8 to 10 individuals in each of those buildings that went through this process with the master schedulers. And then we moved forward from there.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. I appreciate your framing there, especially, the 2 main goals: building capacity with your team members, and then really building that common understanding of the current state of scheduling, clarifying some misconceptions about scheduling. Something that we find in doing this work is that people feel locked into their schedules because somebody worked really hard on it, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And, there's certain details that it's hard to imagine doing something differently. And so having, this outside perspective, or just getting really deeply grounded in the data and the facts can be really, really beneficial.
Yeah, and the other piece to that, for the superintendents on the call is that, the board members had a lot of questions that were grounded in anecdotal information, right? Like, oh, this PTA member tells me this person says this isn't possible. We haven't offered this because, and so I wanted to refute sort of all of those things in a clear and concise way with some, real clarity around what we could do, what we weren't doing, why we weren't doing it, what was possible, and answer all of those questions. I think that, and I wanted to do it in a way where it wasn't some new superintendent who had been a scheduler once upon a time, digging his head into every little thing that my building admins were doing. I wanted them to own the process, right? And sort of walk alongside them in that process of discovery, rather than really put that from a top-down perspective. And so what the DMGroup really did, I thought a terrific job of, was building that capacity and that shared understanding over time in a really non-threatening manner, right? Just asking a lot of questions, coming to consensus on some things, and then really verifying anything that was put out before we put it out.
Yeah, totally. I appreciate your saying that. I think, something worth saying is there's a lot of great stuff going on in Mamaroneck, and I think part of our process uncovered some of the great things that are happening that should be celebrated and maintained, but then also identifying some common opportunities by building that consensus within your stakeholder groups for how things could be improved also. So I think that that's really great to hear. Just to give folks a sense of what this work was all about. So again, this is our secondary scheduling opportunity review. Essentially what we did with Mamaroneck, over the course of 6 months, we engaged in 3 main phases of work that positioned them to be able to both explore the implications of their current schedule designs, but then also uncover some specific opportunities to improve the design of their schedules. So it started with this conducting the scheduling opportunity review. So really we're grounding our work in stakeholder engagement, creating this guiding coalition or scheduling team. So the combination of school and district leaders who are going to be a part of the decision-making team that will help to redesign the schedule in the end. But then from there, a whole bunch of stakeholder engagement, talking to all these various stakeholder groups, because we know you know, a high school schedule, a middle school schedule impacts every single person in the building, student and staff alike, and parents and families. So thinking about how you engage those folks in the process is really valuable. Then balancing that with some data analysis to really come out with this clear assessment of the current state of affairs, have that common understanding of you know, grounded in data and fact. Here are the implications of your current schedule. And then from there, taking the learnings from that opportunity review and getting really, really deep into your district scheduling strategy. What should those specific priorities be that should be driving your schedule? And then what are some of the scheduling implications, those design implications or guideline implications that emerge from there? And so that was really the second phase of work, taking the learnings from that opportunity review and then getting clear on the implications for those various learnings. And then that set us up for that secondary scheduling institute. Sometimes teams engage with this, sometimes they don't. In Mamaroneck, both the middle school and the high school joined our secondary scheduling institute, which created this opportunity for the school-based teams to really engage with the findings, but then also think about the very specific implications and then do some workshopping and planning to be able to put those plans into effect. And so it was really the combination of each of these three phases that made up the full scope of work that we engaged in Mamaroneck. So with that, Chuck, I'd be curious to get your thoughts a little bit, because I'm sure folks on the call are looking at this and they're like, "Whoa, that's a lot of stuff." From your standpoint, what were some of the challenges that you experienced with this work?
So I saw that Chris Borsari, our interim middle school principal, is on the call, and Chris, feel free to chime in on anything that I miss, because you were an integral part of all this. But so the challenges were the unknown about, you know, there were a lot of oh my gosh, we haven't budgeted for this because we don't need it, or we don't have the space, or we don't have the staff. This has been impossible. This is what we're locked into. This is how we've run these courses forever. You know, at the middle school, there were like different variations of a schedule over a 3 or 4 year period. Their timelines were all different. There was not any collective efficacy at all in either building from like a larger group of individuals who own the schedule. It was like the black box in both buildings, right? And so the challenge was peeling that open so that more people had some real skin in the game about understanding the scheduling process and ownership over charting a course for from different directionals for change. At the high school, it had some real budgeting implications, because last year, as my first year here in the superintendent, I told, you know, to the board, hey, we're going to get into an in-depth analysis of sort of what our schedule looks like. We'll look at our staffing around that. And this year will be status quo, but next year I will have a very clear understanding of where those gaps are, how we want to staff this up, what that looks like from a scheduling perspective. And so the work here has been instrumental in paving the way for my next year's budget, right? In terms of what I'm asking for and why I'm asking for it, providing that clear rationale on what we need and why. It also opened some doors of some things that weren't being offered to all students in not intentional ways, but in some real unintentional ways, whether that was how we group students for special ed, what courses were available when by grade level. And so it allowed us to sort of dive into that a little bit as well. And it allowed us, I think, to create, to work from a shared understanding of what was current, right? Rather than wondering about it, rather than continually asking the same questions over and over and over again. It also allowed us at the high school. So this year, a direct outcome of that has been moving up the scheduling timeline, you know, significantly, involving people in very different ways in the construction of that schedule. And so, you know, a year out, I went from having a district where 2 individuals had some working knowledge of how the schedule is constructed to really building a team at both the middle and high school. And so I always equate it to, we've all seen the commercial, right, where the gentleman's walking behind his boss and he's like, hey, we need these reports. He goes, yeah, I got it right here. And then the slide thing opens up and hits him in the head, knocks him unconscious. And there it goes, right? That was our scheduling knowledge here last year. It was all inside of two individuals' heads. And so that's no way to exist, but we exist like that very frequently in schools. And so just pushing back against that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Chris, I don't know if you have any reflections on either, either challenges you experience as the principal of the Homix Middle School, or any specific learnings that came out of this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, similar, Chuck and I started the same day. So tomorrow, what, Thursday or Friday is our anniversary, 1 year here.
Wow.
But I thought that, this is a very complicated middle school. It's almost 1,400, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. It's the biggest one in Westchester County. And there was a lot of confusion, to be quite honest, about the schedule. The most common thing to sort of support what Chuck was saying was we were told we can't. Well, why do we do it? We were told we can't. So the biggest thing for me, and I know for Chuck, was one is having you all work with us to really understand our schedule, our staffing, how we align with the region or the state, the national sort of norms. But most importantly, we developed capacity. So we had about 8 or 9 people on a scheduling team, none of whom, other than one, to Chuck's point, had really had anything to do with the schedule. That person was usually vilified by the staff because, they were the one that created it. So we really created an incredible scheduling team. Everyone became really well informed about the scheduling process, understood why some things were done, why some things couldn't be done, and we were able to make some real informed decisions about our schedule. And I think for me, the biggest sort of indicator of the success was we rolled out a new schedule. We had a lot of voices involved in the process. They were communicating out with the stakeholders they kind of represented. We gave them periodic updates throughout the course of last year, and we rolled out the schedule with some significant changes and really supporting the team model. And we heard nothing but support, which is very, very rare. Once again, I'm not saying there's not anyone mumbling in the corner about it, but for the most part, everything we did was seen as an improvement. And also getting folks to understand what's our aspirational schedule. So we're not at our aspirational schedule yet, which is a true flexible schedule, led by teams, but we definitely took a step in the right direction.
Chris, that's awesome to hear. Thanks so much for sharing. And I think hitting on some really important points, this idea of creating the scheduling team is so powerful, because a lot of times what happens, this has been a recurring theme in a lot of our work. If you're not intentional with creating the structures for decision-making, oftentimes decisions get made by individuals who may not have all of the insights or details that they need to make some of those decisions. And so by being really intentional with bringing the right stakeholders together, you build buy-in for why the decision is the right decision. But then you also position yourself to be able to implement that decision really effectively. So Chris, it's so terrific to hear that things have been going really well for you all at the Homix.
No, thank you, Joe. And you guys were really, really integral to that process. So
yeah, I think the other point, Joe, too, is and to Chris's point, it outlives us, right? Like too many times something is tied to whomever is the principal, the superintendent. It's not connected to the ethos of the building. And when you're trying to build systems, you want to build systems that outlast any individual, and that you can provide an anchor to onboard folks who come into the system, right? Like they have something to grasp and understand. And so the scheduling processes have been fundamentally changed in a way that I think allow for that anchor to exist, to live beyond leadership turnover, right? Which is what plagues public schools to begin with.
Absolutely. No, terrific point. One of the things related to that, so the way we've structured some of this work really with this Secondary Scheduling Institute is to provide a forum to both deliver some professional learning, best practices, things like that, then also to create a space for that scheduling leadership team to come together. I don't know, Chuck or Chris, if you have any reflections on your institute experience.
Go ahead, Chris. You went through it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, what I thought was really good was it was a very well-defined process. You gave us examples, right, to work from, exemplars, different ways to do things. And what it did was it was really like a power course in scheduling. And it was very practical to everyone who was involved. I mean, they were really engaged because they have lived through the challenges of this frequently changing schedule here in our school. So I thought the way it was structured, as it was almost like an academic course. I mean, it was very, very scaffolded, so people could understand it. And I think the best thing that we did was, in addition to that, was we took some visits to some regional middle schools to see how they were doing things. And the information, the background knowledge that they were given by your team really helped them ask great questions. And from those visits, we said, hey, no way in hell we're doing this. But we actually stole 2 or 3 significant elements of our schedule from what we saw other folks doing, you know, within 20 minutes of our school. And we didn't go there to say, hey, you guys are doing it right. We went there to say, how are you answering these questions? And we had a group of guiding questions, which were really helpful, and they were derived from our work with you all.
That's terrific.
Yeah, I would just add that we all have, I think, some real earnest voices in our buildings of people who have ideas, thoughts about how things could be better. And so if you really want to honor sort of, you know, teacher and practitioner voice, giving them an off-ramp with something like this, where there's space and time to process that, I thought that was something that was a powerful outcome that people who had, Chris made the point earlier that, you know, like people would be angry at the scheduler, like, why am I, you know, it gave them an on-ramp into understanding, and it actually gave strength to their voice over time in terms of like, hey, I've had some ideas here, and now here's a place to actually share those out. And I think that was critical as well in terms of you know, engendering some buy-in from the folks in the buildings.
And just to tie to that, to what you allowed us to, what we were able to do because of the work was set clear scheduling priorities, which we were able to share with the entire faculty and staff. And I was able to, these are our priorities. There were 5 of them. These are and as we worked through them, we were able to actually report out, hey, we were able to actually achieve priority number 1, number 2, we're almost there. Number 5, we're not even close to, right? That's part of our aspirational piece. But it really was powerful that they were aware of, you know, what those priorities were, that they made sense, and they could see that we actually made progress towards them.
Yeah, that's terrific. No, I think such a testament to the 2 of you as leaders, you know, in terms of how you engaged in this process and brought your teams together, and then really pushed their thinking to get the most out of all of this work. So that's awesome to hear and see. Final question for you. I'm just curious, what your next sort of set of initiatives are, what work you've done since our work with you ended, for you to continue to push this work forward, embed it in your district practices, really build on the successes of the opportunity review and that institute. Yeah,
so from a sort of 3-pronged perspective, right? At the high school level, the next level of work for us has really been matching up our scheduling aspiration versus our staffing capacity, and having a clear identification of what we need in order to do what we want class-wise and opportunity-wise for students, right? So that's been the next level of work at the high school. At the middle school, it's been engaging in a team schedule that is new, has some flexible operations sort of attached to it, and in a way where Chris was able to embed the extra help session. What we had prior was extra help available in the mornings, a couple days a week. A lot of kids couldn't access that for various reasons. And so we were able to embed that into 4 days a week in the school. And so we're working through what that looks like for athletics and after school activities now. So there's obviously more work to be done, but that set the stage for the middle school for this year and beyond. And then you know, we're engaging with the DM group at our elementary level, because what we have there, and what I'm sure most folks who are here probably have, is you have different elementary schools. Your schedules are probably done in a way that goes along with your elementary principal's capacity to do a spreadsheet or not, right? And what that looks like. And so we're really trying to build the shared capacity amongst our 4 elementary buildings and our leaders there, to utilize some consistent practices across all 4 elementary schools, so that we're clear on what opportunities are available where. So that's sort of like from a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12, that's been the next level of work. And then this year's budget is clear. I'm going to tie some of that work into some of my staffing requests with a clear answer to the why the need is there.
That's terrific. Chris, anything you want to add from the Homics?
No, I mean, honestly, you know, last year was
It's a big year.
Was a lot of work. A lot happened, and we made a lot of progress. Now it's honestly just embedding more of, so we have a new scheduling calendar, right? So we, you know, believe it or not, they never got the calendar done here. I mean, the schedule done here before like mid-July or early August.
Yeah.
So we got it, you know, it was basically done in June. So now we're going to actually hope to do better than that, because we're going to start sooner. We have a structure, so we're not reinventing the wheel. We're going to be looking to refine it. Chuck talked about our win period, which we moved to the afternoon, which has been a huge improvement. Our turnout of kids and the control our teachers have over getting kids to show up as opposed to hoping they show up, or getting kids to stay as opposed to hoping they show up early, has really been beneficial. And we're still working on our flexible, you know, we sort of created this special schedule, which is a flex period that we use. We used it at the beginning of the year to give teams some time to work together. Not totally happy with that. So we're still, our plan was to use it at least 6 times this year. We've already used it twice. We're going to use it at the end of every quarter as well. But that's one area where eventually and we've talked about it, where we have about 425 to 440 kids per team per grade level. Right. And once we exceed 100 kids per team, it's really tough to be really flexible. So, you know, in a couple of years, we'll be below that threshold, and that's where what we're aspiring to. So it's really 3 years down the road. So we're working towards that.
Yeah. No, all great things. I appreciate all of your reflections. Wonderful. So those were the main questions that we had for you all. I want to take just a few minutes to open things up to the group here. We have a whole bunch of people from all across the country on the call today, but curious if anybody on the call has any questions for Chuck or Chris, or for our DM group team related to secondary scheduling work. Feel free to either put a question in the chat or raise your hand, and we can have you come off mute.
I have a quick question. How much stakeholder and student input did you take when you made the schedule?
So a ton, actually. We were, one of the things that I was doing last year, simultaneous to this, but that the DM group also picked up on, was run a significant number of student focus groups about their experiences. And so the DM group talked to a range of students about sort of like what their progression had been and what they saw as strengths and limitations and things that they wish might have been different. And so there was a lot of student voice in sort of coming to the conclusions we came to. And we have some we have a couple sitting groups at the high school that are nice, like test cases for all of that, you know, so they're, you know, and we use them for, it's a real nice cross section that the high school administration is sort of deliberately kind of plucked this really broad cross section of students that represent all sort of demographics at the high school, and we convene them as focus groups for a lot of these types of conversations as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Jennifer, we also have worked with districts that will design like scheduling surveys for their students. And it really depends on the kind of feedback you're looking to get. Like sometimes they'll do surveys related to different kinds of elective offerings, different kinds of like tweaks to bell schedules, things like that. Again, it really depends on the kind of feedback that you're hoping to get. Chris, I saw you came off mute as well. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, the feedback was honestly, as a new person coming in, a lot of the feedback came through a bunch of entry interviews with different constituencies, a lot of time spent with kids, parents, and obviously the faculty and staff members here. The one thing that we also had done in the district, we had done belonging surveys of all of our students and all of our faculty and staff, and actually embedded in those responses was a lot of really valuable information that helped us guide the work. But it was really clear people wanted a consistent schedule. They had done away with teaming in 8th grade in our district 2 years ago for, I'm still not quite sure why, but it was very clear that folks wanted that back across the board as well. So, you know, the feedback was really, really helpful. And I think actually now that we have a schedule that is definitely much improved over the last one, the feedback will be a lot more discreet, and we'll be really, you know, trying to smooth out the rough edges. So we're going to be doing some surveying of our faculty and staff, our parents. We wanted to wait till we got through at least a quarter of the year. And our focus is particularly on these things like the win time and the flexibility of the schedule, and do the teams have enough time to meet and plan?
And just the 8th grade question is that here's an interesting outcome of the scheduling work that DMGroup did for us, right? So a couple of years ago, the district had made the decision to move off of 8th grade teaming due to staffing considerations. Like they thought it was cost prohibitive. When we really pulled through, and the DMGroup pulled through all of it, what they found was we had just as much staff as we had with the 8th grade teams. They were just dispersed in very different ways. And it was sort of really nuanced to pull that apart. And so it answered the question of, it allowed us to do a deeper dive with the staff that we had to go back to the teaming model.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the things, right? This is what happens, right? Like a principal leaves, somebody new comes in. So we did away with teaming because we didn't have the staff. And then, you know, it's hard to do that deep dive to really assess that across, all grade levels. And that was one of the other outcomes that came from the sort of the scheduling work.
Yeah. We got a question in the chat from Luke. Who makes up your scheduling team? Chris, not to put you on the spot, but who's on your scheduling team?
Oh, there's 9 folks. We have interesting enough here, the chairperson of the guidance department was never involved in the schedule development. So we have 2 assistant principals, me, our guidance chairperson, our chair for special ed, a music teacher, a math teacher who actually has a lot of scheduling experience, used to be sort of like our in-house scheduling consultant, but didn't want to own it. Our science, a science teacher, and our director of student life, who's like an overarching guidance counselor, therapist, like kind of is really connected to the community and to all of our kids. I think that covers everybody. So they're like our scheduling committee. The schedule is actually built. The work of building the schedule was built by an assistant principal, the guidance chairperson, and actually our special ed chairperson were the sort of the true like nuts and bolts folks who were, and obviously I was involved in that as well. But what we would do is we would report back to the scheduling team. Okay, this is where we've gotten. We've run into this roadblock. What do you all think? How we've got three ways to potentially address it. That helped us get to our final schedule.
Yeah, that's terrific. What I love about that, right? A nice mix of school administration, school teacher leaders, counselors, just the right mix of people to represent different stakeholder groups, so that as you encounter these different decision points or trade-offs that you need to make, you have the right voices, the right perspectives represented to be able to make some of those decisions really effectively. That's terrific. Exactly what we would suggest. Question from Dale.
Hi, this is so timely. Thank you so much for putting this on, and thank you, Superintendent Sampson, for sharing. My question is a process question in terms of, it's really amazing to have the integration with the superintendent and the principals working in consonance. Would it be advisable, or maybe what are some cautions, or would we, because the context of this is that there's a school that I'm working closely with that wants to change their schedule. However, I'm not sure if the feeder high school and the district is at that stage of wanting to integrate. So the genesis is really, hey, the middle school wants to make these changes, let's start exploring it. So in terms of processes, and because what I heard you folks talk about with Principal Sari and Superintendent Sampson is a multi-step vision, right? So I guess the question I'm really trying to entertain and wrap my head around is where to start. Would it be, important to really just start with and slow down the process maybe a little bit at the high school, and just to continue to gather more information and so forth? So it's just really more of an organizational process type question I'm asking.
So I'll go back to my previous job to answer, Dale. So before I came here, I was a superintendent of the Freehold Regional High School District, and we were a 6 high school, 8 community district. And we changed our schedule, and we spent 3 years in the planning process to change that schedule. The first year was laying out sort of like, what are the strengths of our schedule? Where are there gaps? And that was done through a lot of focus groups and fact gathering. A lot of teams came together and sort of had feedback on that. The second year was like 10 different site visits to other places that had schedules that aligned with some of the aspirational things that we were looking toward. The third year was the building of the nuts and bolts of the schedule. And then we launched because we wanted to make sure we got it right. What you see way too often is some principal comes in and says, I'm going to change the schedule, right? It's Monday. I'm going to change this puppy by Tuesday. And it just leads to a disaster because you don't have clarity on, so my advice on that is, and the reason I knew coming here that there was long-term systems work that had to be done in the district, and the schedule was a significant component of that. And so that's why that's why we had the DMGroup in to do that deep dive, take the time to do it right and well, and so that we're not just firing in whatever direction we think is going to be most beneficial. But the community appreciates that as well. I think they appreciate the deliberateness of taking the time, and while acknowledging, yes, there are some issues with this. And so the immediate stuff we addressed, right? The longer term stuff, we're going to make sure that we get it right and take our time. But the last time I changed the schedule as a superintendent, I took 3 years to do it.
Thank you. Looks like I need to instill some strategic patience.
Yeah. Well, you gotta, I would instill like the deep dive of the why, right? Like from the community and from the staff and faculty and the students, and what is or isn't working. Is it an achievement issue? Is it an instructional time issue? Is it a course opportunity issue? Is it a staffing issue? Right? And there's union considerations and all this. I had to renegotiate my contract when I changed the schedule, and I had to make sure that the Teachers Association was on board in all of that work. So they were partners in that 3-year exploration. So they had ownership. So when it came time to negotiate what we were going to do, they were on board, and that allowed for some significant changes.
Thank you.
I just one other thing, Dale, was just that, both the middle and the high school participated in this process simultaneously. And we participated in the seminars together. We were hoping that we would actually align our time structures better than we did, because we're only about not even a quarter of a mile away from each other, and we do have some shared staff. We were not able to achieve that. But something we'll keep working towards.
Thank you. Very timely. Appreciate it.
I've got a question for Chuck and Chris before we wrap things up. My question for both of you, Chuck, from your perspective, superintendent, central office leader, Chris, your perspective as a principal at the secondary level. If there is one thing for our fellow participants here on the call, what is the one thing you would recommend, Chuck, for central office leaders who are thinking about their schedule? What's the one thing they should start thinking about doing tomorrow? Same thing for you, Chris, for the principals and high school assistant principals on the call.
So I'll say that Chris was superintendent for 7 years as an interim here, so he's got plenty of central office perspective as well. But for me, it's taking the time to ask the questions, right? And so part of the scheduling work grew out of my transition to the district and Chris's transition to the district with parent coffees, student focus groups, and asking a consistent question across the board about what was working, what wasn't working, what was a strength, where were there gaps. And so when you take the time to do that, and when literally hundreds of people across the district can say, yeah, they asked me my opinion on that. They also took a survey on it. They also did it. And so when you're up there really talking about it, resonates with folks that their voices are being heard, A, but B, that we were deliberate in taking the time to actually understand what these issues were and talk to a whole cross section of school community members before we even said, oh, we got to do this. So the DM group was an outgrowth. Bringing the DM group in for us was an outgrowth of all of that front work that we did to identify next levels of work in the district, right? And so it was a natural overlay that made sense to the board and the community when we did it.
Yeah, and I agree with Chuck. I mean, one of the nice things was through Chuck's focus groups and all that, it really helped us gather information as well. So as Chuck went around and he shared with us what he's hearing, and in either summary form or anecdotally, that was helpful. I approached it a little differently because we're called Homix Middle School, and after being here for a short time, it was pretty clear that we weren't really functioning in a lot of ways as a middle school. So I really focused upon what is a middle school. Use the AMLE, the components of a research-based effective middle school to say, hey, this is what a middle school is supposed to be. What are we missing? And we started some really good dialogue, and it helped us move really, really quickly back to what people really wanted. They wanted a middle school, because I said, we don't have to be a middle school, but if we are, then we should really adhere and be working towards having all of those components of an effective middle school for the age we serve. And I think there was a period of time, even with this getting rid of 8th grade teams, it was about money. It was also about creating some sort of elective path that took kids into the high school. And we're not Mamaroneck High School. We're Homix Middle School, and just getting people back to understanding. And what it did for our faculty and staff was a lot of our folks who were here a long time, and even folks in the community, was like, yeah, I remember that. We used to do that. We used to have teams that did this. We used to be structured this way. We used to have these events. And those are all things that we've been working on. So not just the schedule itself, that's been really, really helpful as like a fulcrum, but also all the other aspects and elements of a middle school, as far as celebrating our kids and getting parents back into our building and any number of things.
Terrific. No, what a great question, and great way to wrap things up. Alice, let me hand things back to you to close us out for today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody. We're so thrilled to have you with us. I know that was a ton of information. Our hope is really that you're walking away with some clear next steps or ideas for how to strategically approach secondary scheduling. For some of you, this may be enough to get started. For others who might be looking for more strategic support and clarity into how to engage in this critical work, coming up this January 2025, we're hosting our Secondary Scheduling Institute, Our team will hold your hand and help guide your team to strategically design your school schedule. We'll share those best practices and research-proven strategies we learned in our work so that you and your team can hit the ground running and learn how to schedule strategically. As you heard on the call today, it is a team-based approach. You and your colleagues can work together and plan and schedule effective academic interventions into your schedule. Think about how you're maximizing what courses you're offering, and really consider how you're prioritizing and figuring out how to best leverage your staff to meet the needs of all your students. We'll go through this in 3 cohort-based sessions, which will go in depth into all those things I just mentioned, and really anchor our work in our secondary scheduling framework around goals and priorities, time allocation, course offerings, and staffing. We also provide individual coaching calls with each team who joins the Institute to really get into the nitty-gritty of what is going on in your building. A few reasons why people like districts like Mamaroneck have signed up in the past. Maybe, you're trying to build the capacity of the schedulers in your district outside of that one person in your building. We intentionally set it up as a community of learning so that people can really learn from all across the country, different experiences, and can engage in that work together. And we had this comment from a team that participated this last year, before the Institute, they didn't really know what they didn't know about scheduling. So the Institute is a great way to learn all those things. We do have early bird pricing available for anyone who's here with us today. We're going to extend that through December 15th. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out. I'll pop my email in the chat so that you can reach out and set up some time. Again, we're really grateful to have you all here today. We hope that it was a helpful overview of all the things that your team can do to learn how to schedule strategically. And with that said, we'll give you a few minutes of time back into your schedule. Chuck and Chris and everyone else on the call, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your insights, and for being part of our learning together today.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.